Hello, welcome back. Just a second. Welcome back. If you've been here before, then you know this. My name is Kara, and this is a channel I use to document a 1 year long low-buy project, which is helping me keep a tight budget, which is helping me to pay off um, some giant student loans, but they're getting more manageable. Um, at the end of every month, I check in with how I was able to keep my budget and what percentage of my income I used to pay off debt. And, I actually really enjoy filming that because while I don't always make my goal, I always make progress. And so I hope that you stick around and see at the end of September what has happened this month. And in the meantime, I declared that it would be sort of a story September, and I would share a few more stories about my life and where I've been, jobs I've had, different things like that. But just kind of more in depth who I am, because I've had fun all year long doing these videos, but I have not ventured deeply into very personal territory. I've told a little bit about how I got into so much debt, and I think I would have told that story, I think maybe even in January or February. So it's been a while since I've told anything very serious. Or not serious, but like, you know, meaningful. Something like that. So here we go. And these aren't really, maybe it's not stories. There'll be little bits of stories, I guess. But I wanted to talk about jobs today. And I have had a lot of different jobs. Some of them were more meaningful to me than others, as I think most of us have probably experienced. But along with a lot of different jobs, I grew up. This is like gonna color everything for me because it just does. I grew up in a family that was Lutheran, and we were church going and pretty serious about it. Although in a weird way, like we never talked about it at home, but we like went every Sunday, and my sister and I were in our Sunday school classes, and like you were gonna do this thing, and then it was never a topic at our house. But I think that's just like a shy upper Midwest heritage thing. Um, but in that tradition, there's a concept, vocation, and it's not only in this tradition, but what I got from my tradition was this sense of vocation, and that what you're doing in the world is meaningful and is an expression of who you are, and it's an expression of how you live your faith. And I mean, since I was immersed in this faith tradition, this is just something that I kind of breathed in and soaked in. And I always wanted to do work that was meaningful. I think now there's a lot of sort of the cultural milieu of helping young people follow your passion. This was the follow your passion of my humble little Lutheran family upbringing. It was that you wanted to have a meaningful work, and it could be anything. And there are wonderful quotes from Martin Luther that a lot of, I would see these on posters in the fellowship hall at my church, where the Christian shoemaker is not, isn't doing the right thing by putting little crosses on every shoe. The Christian shoemaker is a Christian because he's making the very best shoes he can for his neighbor. Something like that, where like it's about being an honest and fair business person, and that's a wonderful way to express being a Christian in the world. So I always knew, oh, well, I'll go to school and I'll find some kind of work, but I'm going to be doing it in that spirit. I'm going to be doing it in that spirit of I'm doing honest and good work for a fair price or a fair wage, because that is, like, it sounds so cheesy, but that's the right thing to do. And that if we all do that, then we have honest and fair markets filled with quality goods. Later on, I ended up studying theology, and this is, of course, another job slash career story. I became a pastor. And I remember while I was studying theology, coming across so many beautiful things that Luther or his like direct circle of people wrote, reflecting on such simple things like, is it the seventh commandment? Is it the seventh commandment that you don't steal, or is that, I think it's the seventh, yeah, because the sixth is no adultery, right? So the seventh commandment, not to steal, and he was really good at parsing out, it is not just about walking up and taking something that doesn't belong to you, but that you steal when you sell something for too high a price. You're stealing from the person who's buying it. Or you are stealing when you make shoddy goods that will need to be replaced all the time, because you're stealing. Somebody's going to have to keep replacing that, and they're not getting the value that you sold them. And he also had really interesting things to say about interest and how predatory a practice lending with interest is, and that it's, and this is just at the birth of sort of money economies as opposed to like completely barter and feudal systems, and that even very early on in money economies, the concept of interest and the way that it warps and causes unjust gain, unjust loss. It entraps people. It's just fascinating that these reflections are already there. And anyway, so side note, nerd alert, just really interesting stuff to find. But yes, this heritage that I'm speaking so much about gave me a sense of whatever work I'm doing out in the world is also a vocation. It is a place where you live out the calling, and that's where the word vocation comes from. It's voca, like vocals. Your vocation is what you're doing in the world that helps you live out the fact that you're called. You're living out your calling to be a Christian, to be faithful. Which is beautiful, and I still feel that way all the time, and hope that I am living and working, not just making a living, but pursuing vocation. Lots of jobs along the way, always guided with this sense of whatever I'm doing it to the best of my abilities, as honestly as possible, hoping to be fairly compensated, and that's the right way to approach work in the world. I'd also worked at a summer camp, a Lutheran Bible camp in Montana, Flathead Lutheran Bible Camp, a wonderful place. I'd been a camper there as a kid and always wanted to then work there. And the wonderful thing is that I did get that opportunity, and I was part of the staff there for 4 summers. And I loved every single summer, and every single summer was very different. The different combination of staff and the different activities that you have the opportunity to learn about and then also lead younger people through, just an incredible place. And they're also being even more deeply formed into the desire to not just live and not just have a job, but to be always listening for vocation. What is my calling at this time and place? How should I be to express that I feel called to be doing good for my neighbor through the way I make my money, basically. And all of that constantly kind of leading up to this sense of, well, what do I really want to do with my life? And I never was sure. And I am still not. How about that? I am still not. But there came a point where I was done with college, and I had kind of had a sense that I wanted to go to seminary. But I didn't have the mental picture of I want to be a pastor at the end of that. I didn't feel that particular actual call. I had the mental picture of I just really enjoy studying theology, and I had always been involved in ministries and sometimes had various leadership roles or supporting roles in them. But I just loved studying all this faith tradition and where it comes from and what it means and how it can be a meaningful way to live now in times that are challenging it in every way, and sometimes having very valid critiques and challenges to offer to religious people. But I didn't know what career I wanted at the end of that. And I was a little too intimidated by the academic side. And that may be a mistake, but I don't feel regret. I don't like, oh, I should really try to get back into that and fulfill the destiny that I did not I take that road that I didn't take 10 plus years ago now. I don't feel the urge to go do that again and to take a different road through it. I just feel like those roads are in the past, and I'm actually happily looking for other things. So maybe I should have gone into seminary with the goal of being some kind of academic out of that and teaching theology or working in religious schools or something like that. Maybe, but I actually never got much guidance going into the seminary system. And I don't know if you know this, but lots of churches are struggling to attract young people. There's this deep institutional anxiety of we're not holding on to the generations, and younger people are leaving the churches. And for a while, everybody in church leadership was like, oh, that's fine. They'll come back when they have kids. They'll come back when they're married. And then a whole generation of people, of me, and my age and younger, like, we're not getting married. And we're not necessarily having children. And even the ones who are not necessarily going back to church. And so it's like the culture really shifted and moved, and the churches are just kind of waiting for this great wave coming back in. I don't think is coming back in. At any rate, churches as institutions are extremely anxious about how do we hold on to young people. And so when I expressed in my own church and throughout going to like working at this camp and at different times, when I said, I think I want to go to seminary, there was such a swell of support. It was like a wave that picked me up like Moana and just like put me in some other place. Or I've written about this and likened it to getting on a train track that was just so very well greased that it just started moving, and I didn't have a lot of information about what I had just kind of gotten into. And the sad thing is that information was there, but I didn't really know about it. And it's sort of like, well, they thought I knew and I thought someone would tell me, and nothing really. So I didn't know to look around, and they didn't know that I would have liked some other options to talk about. I just got on this track labeled go to seminary, become a pastor. And so that's what I did. And it's not to say that I was so helpless or clueless, or that it wasn't something that I thought I really wanted. I studied hard and I did go to seminary, and it's not a small undertaking. I really was sure that I wanted to be in school. I was always kind of terrified of the outcome, but newsflash, everybody in seminary is terrified of becoming a pastor, and everybody in seminary is absolutely a neurotic mess over whether they're doing the right thing or not. And so I didn't think myself any different. Why should I? So we graduate. We've had 4 years, 3 in the classroom, 1 year out doing internships. And I had filled out this rash of paperwork that helps the church understand who I am and what kind of parish I think I would fit well in, and what parts of the country I'm interested in living in. And they kind of take all this into account and you get assigned to a region of the country. And then within that region, there are bishops of different smaller areas that are called synods. And anyway, it's quite a process, but you end up, by the time you're graduating and you know at least what smaller area, what synod you're going to go to. And I was going to be going to the Northwest Washington Synod, which is kind of the northwest corner of Washington, lo and behold. And it extends from the border down to, I think, Des Moines, which is south of Seattle. I think Des Moines is kind of like the southernmost part of it. And out about as far as, I'm not really sure how far east it extends, but it's just kind of this small square of Northwest Washington. Like by the time you get over the mountains, then you're in Eastern Washington, and that's a different region within the church. So like, this is just insider baseball right now. Anyway, I get sent to the Northwest Washington Synod, and I house sat for a summer and kind of waited, did a lot of waiting, lots of anxiety that summer. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was also deeply, deeply grieving the loss of community. I had been in school with peers and people going through the same experience and all the crazy doubt and wonder of it all. And then I was alone. Literally very alone. I was house sitting in a stranger's house. I had a couple friends in the area, and we visited a couple times over that summer. But mostly I was waiting to hear from the office of the bishop when and where there would be interviews set up to start finding out what church might hire me. And a couple churches came along, and I had a couple interviews over Skype. I had a couple of them in person. And anyway, a long story short is that eventually I was called and hired by a small church outside of Seattle, and I started serving them in October of 2011. And they were wonderful people, and I remember at my first in-person interview with them, they had this basket of a bunch of homemade goodies from people in the church, and their men's ministry was a beer brewing club. Like, this was a cool church, and like, at the time I was a very serious beer fan, and so I kind of felt like, oh, this is a match made in heaven. Like, the men's ministry makes beer, and there's this basket of chocolate and beer, and like, these guys, this is the place for me. Anyway, that is not the only reason that I liked them. They were also just, they were such a flexible, and they had this openness and creativity to their community because they'd never owned a building. They had worshipped in a variety of different places in the town where they were. And so while they kind of had this sometimes a little inferiority complex, like they're not a real church yet kind of event, like feeling to them, but they didn't let that stop them, and they were known all over town for the work they did. They had started all kinds of like meal programs and after school programs, and they visited people in the prison there in town, and you know, they were known all over town as a church that does stuff for their town, does stuff for their neighborhood. And so that was really cool, that even though they didn't have a building, and a lot of churches get caught up and their building is their identity, this was a church who really found their identity in what they did for their town and for their neighbors. And they're still very, very good, cool people. And it's weird because I know if I were to have a do-over, I could be a better pastor for them, and I would appreciate and love them in the moment, actually the way I do now. But let's see, it's coming up on 9 years ago I would have been getting started there. And I started out with them at such a deficit personally. Um, the loneliness, and I had a significant amount of financial stress because I had all these student loans and um, a relatively small paycheck from them, but they were doing the best they could. Um, and I couldn't figure out where to live. I had some pretty unstable housing for a while, and I didn't realize a lot of the strain on me and how it was affecting me. But I got very depressed. And so I wasn't really able to see a lot of the good going on there. Um, there are some systemic matters in the institutional church that did not help. I was flying solo, and I was literally solo. I didn't have a colleague or anybody from that wider body in the area to kind of mentor, or didn't know any of them. I'd never lived in Washington before. So I'm the kind of person who, if you drop me into a difficult situation, I am going to like tie my hair back and put on my work boots and try to figure out how to do it. And it's like, you either dropped me here with the resources I'm supposed to count on, or I'll figure it out. And I thought, okay, like, I'm here and you've got me here flying solo. I guess I learned how to fly solo. I am not a person who's like of many generations of clergy. And I think this is an institutional weakness of the Lutheran Church, is that a great number of pastors have other pastors in their families, and they forget to tell you if you don't have a family full of clergy, you might not know everything that's available to clergy, or what you should actually expect from your synod or from your congregation. I didn't have some uncle pastor off, down the road who would say, this or that isn't really normal about your situation. You should ask so-and-so about how to fix that. I just thought, okay, I gotta figure this crap out. And if I'm doing it alone, I guess I'm doing it alone. And that's a little bit of a lie. I actually do have an uncle who was a Lutheran pastor, but I don't know him very well, and he was in Minnesota and he was retired. So I didn't really think of him as a person to call. Yeah, man, it was a tough time. Super attractive, Kara. It was a tough time. And leaving ministry was just as weighty of a decision. And what's funny is I have gotten more and more disillusioned with the institution, and I just see so many mainline Protestant denominations falling all over themselves to run after the latest trend. And they put enormous pressure on their clergy to enact programs that chase after the latest trend that's gonna bring everybody back to church and make everything like the good old days again. I see these mainline denominations just falling all over themselves to figure out what thing is going to save the institutions. And I see the pressure that they put on clergy, and it's kind of crazy. So I've gotten more and more disillusioned with the institutions themselves, while at the same time I have come to love the local church more and more and more, and to see what an absolute gem was the congregation that I got to serve. And whenever I have met and visited small churches all over the country, a great number of them are just completely charming and good communities full of people who care about one another, and they might be a little clumsy in how they are trying to figure out how to help more people come and enjoy what they enjoy together. There's no doubt that they're clumsy about that, but that the people there are so, so good is very clear to me. Very, very clear to me. And I couldn't see that about my people when they were my people. So there's a bittersweet later appreciation of them. And there was trouble in paradise. Like, there were certain things that I wanted our congregation to care about, like faith formation, and that I don't think faith formation is something that can be done with videos and pizza parties. And I don't think that faith formation is something that can happen a couple times a year. And I also don't think that worship can ever be entertainment, and that the minute we go towards entertaining ourselves, we're missing a point that is central. So there were some like loggerheads there as well. And I often wasn't as vocal about how dire I really thought it was. You know, that I don't know if any of you would be familiar with the writing of Rod Dreher. He wrote a book called The Benedict Option, and he keeps a blog on the news website, The American Conservative. And I was reading his work while I was a pastor, and he so well described the church-going family who thinks everything is fine and their kids go to Sunday school, but as soon as they graduate and are out of the door of their parents' house, they never go to church and they never come back either. Well, how well-formed was their faith? Like, that describes most of my generation. We're not in church. Even if we were brought up in it, most of us didn't stay. And those few of us who, and I'm not one of them obviously, have children and are trying to raise them in church are having even harder times getting a worldview and a perspective shaped by faith to stick in a super materialistic, very, just like a culture completely grounded at odds with like the traditional Christian faith. So we're just at a huge disadvantage when it comes to shaping minds and hearts in a way that is more powerful than the mind shaping and heart shaping power that the culture at large has. And I lost sleep, a lot of lost sleep over my parish and how its children were not going to have a chance when they left their parents' homes to hold on to the tiny little, mostly sentimental faith that they had been given. But, you know, to criticize the families and their practices as a pastor is to bite the hand that feeds you. And I felt that very viscerally, and it prevented me from speaking up as much as I wanted to. And there was also some tension there that led to me wanting to get out. I didn't like the feeling, and it was internal to me because they paid me. I felt a very deep resistance in myself to criticize anything that they were doing or to try to change the way they did things. There's a power dynamic there that I don't see a lot of, you know, clergy leadership books about how to navigate that. When you feel economically pressed, but the people are doing their very best to pay you, it's very hard to criticize them, but that might ultimately be the thing that the church needs. I was always torn up inside over that. And it certainly contributed to my stress load and wanting to stop. This is so not everything, but it's kind of an overwhelming story to dive even partially back into to tell. I have, if I look behind my laptop, I can see my bookshelf over there where there's, journals of the last 20 years of my life. And oh gosh, a nice chunk of those was written while I was in ministry. And there's no way to share that all in a video. Anyway, after close to 5 years, I started wondering if I should seek a new church or if I just needed to be done. I was very, very miserable, and I had talked to my bishop a little bit, and he thought it was okay. It was a good idea. Go ahead and look around, fill out your paperwork, throw your hat into the ring to see if other churches interviewing want to talk to you, want to interview you. And a few did. And in that interviewing process, the few that I did, it seemed kind of a SSDD situation. Same stuff, different day. And I lost heart. I really lost heart. And so I decided to take a break. And so I resigned in May 2016. I think that's when it was. And I did what our denomination called being on leave. So I was on leave from being called to a congregation, and I took a break. I traveled a little bit. I went to Minnesota, traveled the country just a little bit. Kind of had the opportunity to do a road trip up the Mississippi River, which is really cool. There's a lot to see along the way. And then I came back out to Washington and moved to Bainbridge Island and started working at a restaurant. And I gotta say, it was such a relief. It was such a relief, even though my financial situation had never been worse. And I was also becoming conscious at that time of, I was just at that time becoming very conscious of the fact that my Department of Education loan consolidation that offered me an income-based repayment plan, and I faithfully made the payment all through these years. So now we're talking 5-some years into it. Nice of them to calculate a payment that doesn't cover the interest, so that my balance had continued to grow through that whole time. And sure, it would have been great to have noticed and realized that earlier. But as I have described in my How I Got Into So Much Debt video, I didn't know it till I knew it. And so it was around the year 2016, I was kind of like in the later part of the year, the fall of that year, I was realizing what a hole financially I was in and looking around for how do I start dealing with this. The minimum payment is clearly not the game plan. What can the game plan be? So I had started working in this restaurant. The work was good, made plenty of money, good hourly wage, followed by wonderful tips. It was a little French bistro out on Bainbridge, and the staff was fun. I started making new friends, and just sort of living a normal early 30s lifestyle, patching along rent in like a basement here and an apartment over a garage there. I was in a relationship at that time, but that ended up ending a little while later. And it was at least a full year of just kind of stopping being in the church. I didn't go to church anywhere. It was really like almost anxiety, panic attack provoking to try to go to church. And so after a few attempts, I just didn't go anymore. So yeah, how did that year go? It's like a blur. It's a blur. And I really did just enjoy that work at the restaurant. So that was my life. I worked part-time and made enough to pay my rent, pay my minimum bills, and just kind of rest in a lot of ways, resting internally and kind of figuring out what could be next. And unfortunately, that relationship ended, and that precipitated another quick move to a place where I could live on my own. And actually, it kind of helped. I hate to say this, but it kind of helped me get serious about what I needed to do, because when you're in a relationship going poorly, you can't make any plans because it could stop, and then you need to reevaluate. And I was always in that relationship kind of like, at some point a shoe was going to drop. At some point the other shoe is going to drop, and then I will be dealing with this, because in the relationship with him, he was such a high spender, and he always had he was shaming me over my debt, and at the same time not wanting to rein in lifestyle or support any of my plans to get serious about it. And on the day I told him about how cool I thought Mr. Money Mustache was, and he shit all over it, that was like one of those you know now moments. So it's so terrible, and I've apologized to him because I was probably meaner than I needed to be when we broke up. But finally I felt the sense of, okay, I've made a mess of my life. I chose the wrong first career, and I have spent all this money on an education, and now I don't really want to operate in that profession anymore. I don't have any other professional experience at the moment. I gotta circle the wagons and figure out life right now. And that was a very hard summer. That would have been the summer of 2017. Yeah. But that was the summer where I got serious about just figuring out everything, and to radically trim my own lifestyle, and to throw everything at my debt that I possibly could. And it was this major turning point also in the sense of vocation, because I knew after ministry that I want to do well and be honest and hardworking in my work, but I also don't want my work to be where I invest my identity. After that summer, I was able to, or it was during that summer, I found this small private school on Bainbridge Island, was looking for a 1-year librarian. They just needed, I guess, like, I don't know how their whole situation was working out, but they wanted to hire a librarian for 1 year. And I have clearly never been a librarian, but I had kind of a version, a type of each of the qualifications that they were looking for. And so I thought, well, why not? I mean, I can keep working at this restaurant, but what if it worked out? Oh my goodness. What if it did work out that I could work as a librarian for a year? That would be amazing. And I can just keep doing this restaurant thing as well. But what if I had a day job like that? And so I applied, and with my alternative but adequate, let's say, qualifications, they did hire me. And so for 1 year, I got to be the librarian at Hyla Middle School, and that was amazing. And one of the things that was amazing was the radical difference that I experienced in a workplace that was very supportive. And it's sad to say this, but whereas I dove into pastoral ministry and really kind of was like, oh, okay, like, I'm alone and gotta figure this out, I guess. Even though I was only gonna be their librarian for a year, they sent me to like conferences, and the staff like cared about me, like wanted to know all about me, and they brought me in, and I felt like part of their community. Um, and they invested in me, even though from the very outset it was likely that I was only with them for a year. And that was just shockingly nice. Shockingly nice to feel. And the students were adorable. I mean, middle schoolers are middle schoolers, but I kind of like that age group. Um, and I liked the opportunity to build kind of my own thing for a year. Obviously, there's the library itself and checking books in and checking books out. Um, and I got to buy new books for the school with a certain amount of money every month. To shop for young adult fiction was uh, revelatory as to what is out there in the world these days. Really cool. I mean, there's great YA fiction, and it was fun to bring in some of that, and it was fun to find, you know, classics like Harry Potter and The Hunger Games and things. And the fact that I had read a lot of those got me some cred among the students. So yeah, that was a very fun year, and the staff was very welcoming to me and good. And at the end of the year, it was just for a year. That was always most likely the story. The school year came to a close, and I had to decide at that point if I should look for more full-time work and stay in Washington, or I had often thought over the years, I sure would like to live in Idaho near my family. And ultimately, obviously, that is what I chose. I moved here, and I lived with my parents for 3 months when I first got here, October, November, December of 2018. And that was actually really fun. It was like I got to get to know them all over again and really have some time with them. And now, of course, I see them every week or so. And that's like what I came for. That, like, to see my parents regularly, to see my sister and her kids regularly. And of course, I love my brother-in-law. That's what I came for. And now that I am not as compelled to build my sense of identity in my work, the question is now becoming, so what am I about? And what will vocation look like if it's not explicitly how I'm making a living? And it's opened up the future in a really beautiful way. I am so excited to be done with my debt. I am happy with where I work. I feel like that work is valuable and has integrity, and it's building and sustaining good things in this community. I mean, it's a small business in a small town, giving over 65 people, sometimes up into the 70s, but most of the time we're around 65 staff, a living wage, a good wage. I think I might have mentioned, maybe I didn't in this video, but minimum wage in Idaho is $7.25. And that's crazy. And it's a right to work state. So, like, you don't have much advocacy about that. And this is a small business that commits, like, nobody starts under 12 here. And that's really good because, like, sure, it's still 12, but, like, that's important that we're voluntarily well above the minimum wage in this state. It's a place where young people can come in and get their first experience working, and it's a place where if you want to learn a part of business and like become a manager, it's a small enough business where that's going to be noticed, and they're going to find ways. We definitely are always looking for that person looking around, hungry for more leadership, hungry for more responsibility, and there's plenty of it to go around. So people can gain a lot of skills at this small store in a small town. I'm really happy to work there, and I'm proud of what we do. I love how much local food we are selling. So many local producers are selling their cheese, their milk, their produce, their meat. There's a couple of people in town who are making masks lately, and we're selling their masks. We're selling different household goods that people have sewn or like crafted. It's really great. It's really great. So, and And I love that I can believe in what I'm doing and enjoy it and work hard at it, but it's also not everything about me. And I guess that sense of the future opening up that I have could possibly be very naive given the way the pandemic has unfolded in this country and the economic havoc. Um, and of course, there's a lot of unrest and uncertainty about our country. Um, and Idaho is full of people with worst case scenario always on their mind. This is like the land of preppers. Um, so every now and then, like, it just kind of sinks in, and every now and then I picture worst case scenarios as well. But beyond that, um, I am so glad that here I will have the chance to build a life where my actual dream is to just run a small, like, bed and breakfast or some kind of retreat center, like my own home, and then like one or two tiny houses on the property that I can rent or use as retreat spaces or rentals for other people to live in. Um, I want to have some chickens and ducks, of course, and I mean, the sky's the limit, maybe a goat. um, I really want to have a simple, quiet life like that, um, and to be making a little patch of land better and healthier every year, and to be making a place where my living space can be hospitable and welcoming to other people, and to offer them also a place to relax and to heal and to find rest. I feel very compelled to offer that because that's been so important to me, to find places and times and seasons of recuperating. It's very important to me. So I want my life to be about hospitality, and I want my life to be about, this is funny for a woman to say, but I want my life to be about husbandry, healing a patch of land, taking care of some animals, because those things go hand in hand. To heal land, you need animals, and to take good care of animals, you need healthy land. And if some people regain their healing or sense of self there as well, that is wonderful. So that's kind of what I picture long term. I want to work for wages only as long as I need to make that happen. My own needs are often quite small, so I'm hoping that this is affordable sooner than later once I get out of my debt. But my own experience has shaped me to really, really value simplicity and to really value quiet spaces, and this sense of, if I could make a little part of the world just a little better, that will be enough for me. Actually, I can't do everything, and I certainly don't have a lot of control. But I can try to do that. So I guess that's the first story of Story September. Thank you for listening. The light has changed an awful lot while we sat here. There was a little bit of daylight when I started, but I guess it's dusk now. I'll see you in a week. Thanks for listening.